Amaka James was the kind of woman who didn't like unnecessary stress. At 32, she had mastered the art of moving through Lagos with calm precision. She worked as a receptionist at a private transport company. It wasn't her dream job, but it paid enough to survive, and for now, that was enough. She sat at the front desk of Grand Swift Logistics, a mid-sized delivery company tucked inside a 3-story building near the Oshodi bus terminal. It was lunch hour, and the front office was quiet. The phones had stopped ringing for now, and the drivers were either on the road or dozing in their trucks outside. She glanced at the small clock near her computer. 1:10 p.m. Right on time. She pulled out her bag from under the desk, brought out a small face towel, dabbed the sweat from her neck, and picked up her purse. "Lara, you want anything?" she asked her colleague, seated at the next table. Lara shook her head, not lifting her eyes from her screen. "No thanks. Same place?" "Of course," Amaka replied with a soft smile. She stepped out into the sun, walked across the compound, and joined the stream of people heading toward a place she knew too well. Tasty Castle. The restaurant stood just a few blocks away, not too big, not too small, painted cream and brown with a bold glass door and a flickering LED sign that read "Fresh Taste, Happy Heart." Tasty Castle wasn't fancy, but it wasn't cheap either. It was the sweet middle where you could sit in air conditioning, eat a proper meal, and not feel like you were begging your bank account for forgiveness afterward. Their rice always tasted fresh, their meat portions were generous, and the waiters actually wore uniforms. It was the kind of place teachers, secretaries, junior bankers, and dispatch riders all loved. In fact, people from offices nearby had nicknamed it the office canteen. Amaka pushed open the door and was greeted by the familiar scent of spice, pepper, and something sweet that always lingered in the air. The place was almost full, like it always was at lunch, but the table by the window where she usually sat was still free. She walked to the counter. Good afternoon, madam," the cashier said with a smile. "Your usual?" Amaka smiled back. "Yes, please. Jollof rice, grilled chicken, small coleslaw, and a bottle of water." "Got it?" She paid, collected her receipt, and walked to her table. A few moments later, one of the servers brought her tray. The food looked perfect. The chicken was golden, the jollof rice orange and steaming. She arranged her cutlery neatly, whispered a quiet prayer of thanks, and began to eat. 2 bites in, she sighed happily. This was what she needed. A break from work, a plate of something warm, peace. Then, on her 4th bite, she paused. She had bitten into something hard. She pulled it out gently with her fingers. Her brows slowly narrowed. It looked like part of a plastic wrapper, thin, black, and slippery. She placed it on the edge of the plate, picked up her fork again, and pushed through the chicken. Something didn't look right. There was a strange color around the inside of the meat, slightly gray, not pink. She sniffed it. Her stomach turned. She dropped the fork. Suddenly, the background noise of clinking plates and chatter around her felt louder. She looked around the room. People were still eating like nothing was wrong. Amaka stared at the piece of chicken, then at the plastic strand beside it. Something wasn't right. She pushed her plate away and sat still. Then she picked up her phone and took a picture. Amaka returned to the office with her lunch barely touched. She held the takeaway pack tightly in a black nylon bag, her face unreadable. The receptionist's desk felt colder than before. Her hands hovered over her keyboard, but she didn't type anything. She kept replaying the moment in her mind, the plastic in her mouth, the strange gray layer inside the chicken. She wasn't the kind to overreact. She'd eaten at Tasty Castle at least 4 times a week for the past 2 years. Their food had always been clean, consistent, affordable, but this time, something was off. She opened her phone gallery, zoomed in on the photo she took. The strand of black plastic stood out against the white plate. Maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe it fell into the food accidentally. But what about the chicken? She turned to Lara, her colleague, who was still at her desk. Lara, Amaka said quietly, "Do you still eat at Tasty Castle?" Lara looked up. "Sometimes. Why?" Amaka held up her phone and showed her the picture. "Found that in my chicken." Lara squinted. "N? Is that nylon?" Amaka nodded. "And this gray part inside? It didn't smell right." Lara's face changed. "Did you tell them?" Amaka shook her head. "Not yet. I don't want to cause wahala." Lara leaned in. "Sometimes it's better to speak up, especially if others are eating there too." Amaka nodded slowly. "I just hope it was a one-time thing." But by 2:30 p.m., her hopes were dashed. A driver from another logistics company across the street came rushing into the reception holding his stomach and groaning in pain. "My bell, oh," he cried. "I just chopped from Tasty Castle now." They rushed him to the nearby pharmacy. His colleague said he had the grilled beef and jollof, just like Amaka. The pharmacy's nurse gave him something to reduce nausea, but advised he visit a clinic. She told his colleague quietly, "We've treated 3 people from that place this week." 3 people? Amaka's heart dropped. This wasn't just bad luck. Something was wrong. She spent the rest of the afternoon distracted. By the time work closed at 5 p.m., she packed her bag. As she walked toward the bus stop, she saw something that froze her in her steps. Across the road, in front of Tasty Castle, a woman was bent over, vomiting beside the pavement. A security man rushed to her side, trying to help. A small crowd gathered quickly, Lagos style. Someone shouted, "She just chopped rice from there now, oh." Another voice replied, "It be like, say the thing they spoil people's stomach." Amaka's heart dropped. She didn't wait. She crossed the road, pulled out her phone and began recording from a distance. Not for drama, not for social media, but for evidence. Something was seriously wrong at that restaurant, and she was not the only one who knew it. The next day, Amaka didn't go to Tasty Castle. Instead, she packed a flask of rice and stew from home and ate quietly at her desk. But something still tugged at her spirit. That evening, she decided to pass by the restaurant not to eat, just to observe. She wore a casual outfit and walked in like a regular customer, her phone recording quietly from her purse. The restaurant was half full. The staff moved as usual, but something felt tense. She noticed a new face, a young man, maybe 19 or 20, carrying trays and clearing tables. His eyes darted nervously with every step. He looked like someone trying not to be noticed. She waited until he stepped outside to dump a tray of leftovers into the bin. She followed. "Hi," she said softly. The boy jumped, startled. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said quickly. "I just want to ask a question." He hesitated. "I had your chicken 2 days ago. There was plastic in it, and it didn't smell right." The boy sighed, eyes scanning the alley behind the restaurant. "You didn't hear it from me?" he whispered. Madam has been buying from a new supplier. Supplier? Amaka repeated. Cheap meat, very cheap. We used to get from mile 2 cold room. Now it's some warehouse in Mushin. I don't even know where the meat comes from again. Amaka's stomach turned. The boy leaned in closer. Even the freezer spoiled last week. She said to still use the meat. Just grill it extra. Amaka covered her mouth. He stepped back quickly. Please, don't tell anyone I said anything. I need this job. And with that, he slipped back inside. Amaka stood there, frozen, as the faint smell of grilled meat floated through the back door. Amaka couldn't sleep that night. She tossed in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, her phone screen dim beside her. She had watched the video of the woman vomiting in front of Tasty Castle at least 5 times. Her gut told her it wasn't an isolated case. The following day, during lunch break, instead of heading to the restaurant, she walked into a nearby pharmacy. The pharmacist, a woman in her 40s with gentle eyes, looked up. Good afternoon. Can I help you? Amaka approached the counter. Please, I need to ask something. Not for medicine. I need to understand. The woman leaned in, listening. I think I ate something wrong from a restaurant yesterday. There was a rubber-like material in the chicken, and the inside of the meat looked gray, and I heard someone else vomited after eating there. The pharmacist's face turned serious. Gray meat? She asked. Amaka nodded. Did it smell odd? Yes. The woman was quiet for a moment. Madam, she said gently, sometimes, when meat is not preserved properly, especially frozen ones from the back market, it starts to decompose from the inside. They clean the outside, spice it heavily, but inside, the bacteria is already growing. Amaka felt her stomach clench. Some places, the woman continued, they buy meat that's been imported without approval, spoiled, frozen for too long, or even uninspected. It happens. Amaka asked softly, but can it cause serious illness? Absolutely, especially if someone's immune system is weak. Amaka thanked her and walked out slowly. Her head was spinning. It wasn't just a mistake. It was negligence, maybe greed, maybe more. By the next morning, Amaka's inbox had a new message. No name, no subject, just one line. You're asking too many questions. Mind your business. She stared at it, unsure whether to be afraid or angry. The message had no traceable email address, no reply option. She didn't tell anyone, not even Laura. But she backed up the video of the kitchen staff. She saved the photo of the food. She even wrote down notes in a small diary and hid it in her handbag. Whatever this was, someone didn't want her involved. 2 days later, Laura brought more news. You remember the lady that vomited outside the restaurant last week? Amaka nodded. She works at Linstech, that IT company beside us. Well, someone said she hasn't been to work since that day. Amaka frowned. What do you mean? She was admitted. Her organs started failing. Foodborne infection. Amaka's breath caught in her chest. Why isn't it in the news? Lara leaned closer. Her family wants to keep it quiet, but I heard one of the nurses say her system reacted badly to something they suspect spoiled animal meat. Amaka felt the room spin. She picked up her phone, heart racing. This was no longer about chicken, or gray meat, or food safety. Someone had nearly died. That evening, Amaka made an anonymous call to a private health journalist, someone who had once written about food vendors using fake spices and expired oil in Lagos. She gave her everything: the photos, the video, the warning message, the sick woman's name, even the whispered words from the scared kitchen staff. 3 days later, in the evening, the restaurant was raided not just by environmental health officers, but by food safety agents from Lagos State Ministry of Health. Amaka had left work a little late, but stayed across the road to watch. People had gathered quickly, like Lagosians always do. Phones were out. A few curious workers from nearby offices whispered, "You see, I talk am. That meat no dey smell right since last week. But the rice dey always sweet. Who would have guessed? I beg, if you see cheap meat for expensive location, ask questions." From a safe distance, Amaka recorded everything. Some of the officers went inside. Others waited at the back of the van. After about 20 minutes, they came out with a black bin bag sealed and tagged. Then came the second. Then a third. By the fourth, whispers turned into murmurs. Something was going on in that kitchen. Something serious. One of the kitchen assistants, a young boy, was crying as he stood outside. His hands were shaking, and he kept looking around like he didn't know where to go. Amaka crossed over slowly. "Are you okay?" she asked. He looked at her with red eyes. "I told her," he said in a small voice. "Told who?" "Mama Rose, the owner. I told her that chicken smelled bad last week. I told her the freezer is not freezing well again." Amaka stared at him. He continued. "She said it was fine. Said once it's seasoned and grilled, they won't know. But madam, I knew." The boy walked off before Amaka could ask more. She looked back at the restaurant. The officers seized meat from the cold room, inspected the kitchen, and asked every staff member to write a statement. Mama Rose, the owner, claimed innocence. She blamed her supplier. The supplier turned out to be a man named Chief Ike, a retired market chairman who had been selling off imported frozen meat unfit for human consumption. He operated from a warehouse in Mushin. No licenses, no safety clearance, just bulk meat at promo prices. It wasn't just Tasty Castle buying from him. He had sold to over 7 eateries across Lagos. After the fire, Tasty Castle was shut down. Permanently. The Fresh Taste, Happy Heart sign was pulled down. The once crowded restaurant now stood behind red tape with sealed, boldly stamped on the glass. People walked by and shook their heads. Some blamed the owner. Some blamed the city. But Amaka? She walked past that building with quiet steps. No camera, no voice notes, just peace.